Hello, everybody, and welcome back to At the Movies with William Fletcher. As per usual, I am your host, William Fletcher, and this week we're going to be doing something a little different. So instead of the usual episode of me and a guest or two, it'll just be myself this week, just talking about a film I watched yesterday, and I thought I might give this a go and see, if it turns out well, if I have a good. So, so it'll just be me on this episode, and I guess I'll see how this goes. So this week I will be talking about the film and the TV show. What We Do in the Shadows, which I'm a massive fan of the TV series. So that's, I guess, sort of just goes my sort of broad general opinions of the film and the TV series. So I watched the TV series first at the end of last year, and I'm a big fan of it. I think it's one of the best TV shows that's come out in the past few years. I think it's really, really good, and I cannot wait to see what they do for season three. So the TV show is absolutely fantastic, and so I watched the film yesterday, having not seen it before, but hearing sort of great things about it, and being a fan, I guess, of Taika Waititi. Um, and so I watched the film yesterday and decided to do an episode on it. So yeah, I guess I'll talk about the film first, as I so yeah, I think I this is the second Taika Waititi film I've done on the show. A couple weeks ago, we did Jojo Rabbit. Was it? Yeah, was it last week actually? It might have been last week actually that I did Jojo Rabbit. I'm actually trying to. Yeah, I think it might have been last week actually that I did Jojo. Just quickly checking. Yeah, last week was Jojo Rabbit, which I was not the biggest fan of. I thought it was perfectly fine, but nothing outstanding. I expected more from Taika Waititi, being a big fan of his of Thor Ragnarok, which I thought was a very, very good film. And so this film, What We Do in the Shadows, I would put as his best film that I've seen of his so far. So I've seen, uh, so yeah, I think this is of the films I have seen of Taika Waititi. I put this as his best. Um, yeah, so I've seen half of his like sort of released filmography at this point. So What We Do in the Shadows, Thor Ragnarok, and Jojo Rabbit, which I've seen those three. And this is his best film of those. I would say, and I will catch up on his other filmography that I haven't seen yet. Um, and I think Taika Waititi right now is probably one of the best director writers working today. I think that a lot of he's a very unique director and writer. He has a very unique style, very sort of this whole New Zealand style. Well, not New Zealand style per se, but because of he's from New Zealand, he's very much got a unique way of doing comedy, and I think he's just very good. And I'm very, very interested to see what he does with Thor, Love and Thunder, as well as Next Goal Wins, which I'm very interested in seeing. And what I've seen of that, it looks like a lot of fun. Um, so yeah, what we do in the shadows. A very for those of you who haven't seen it, it's basically a mockumentary type film, sort of like something like The Office, for example, or sort of a film like that. Yeah, a mockumentary basically of these three vampires whose names are Viego, Ladislav, Deacon, and Peter. And they're four vampires and they live in a flat. They share a house rather together in New Zealand, and basically the film is just sort of the what their lives are like as vampires, and it's very much a whole very comedic way of taking vampires and putting a spin on it and making it a bit of a comedy. Um, and so they are these very and so they're all sort of very so you sort of got like the main three who you spend most of the story with Viego, Vladislav, and Deacon, who are like the main three, who are played by oh God, give me a second, I gotta find Taika Waititi, Jermaine Clement, and Jonathan Bruges, I think. Taika Waititi and Jermaine Clement, who are the creators of this film, the I believe both other credited writers on this film, and as well as the credited directors as well. So they're all sort of vampires, and then Peter, who is like the oldest vampire, is very much a sort of Nosferatu inspired look. Like the bald, the very like creepy looking. The long teeth, the long fingernails, very very classically inspired um, by Nosferatu, and that basically. And I think I get to the show later, but I'm just going to talk about the film for a little bit, and then I'll talk about the show, and then give my ratings for both of those. Um, so yeah, this film premiered uh in 2014. Well, so it premiered at Sundance Film Festival in 2014, and then was released in New Zealand later that same year, but didn't come out to the places like the United States until 2015. Um, and so this is a very low budget film. It is very much a film that if I was to look at it says here the budget was 1.6 million, which is quite impressive that they're able to do as much as they do, because if you watching the film very much does a lot of things that it's sort of like very they do a lot. There's lots of like wire work. There's lots of sets. There's lots of like special. There's a lot of practical stuff, but I think there's like some visual effects they have to do, and they they very much that's one of the most a note I made is that it's a very small budget for this kind of film, but yet they do so much with that with that rather limited budget. And so I think that the performances in it as well are not they're not like groundbreaking like Oscar worthy performances, but they're very much performances that work for the kind of film they're making and very much fits for the story. They don't need to be these big like sort of very Oscar baity type performances. They can just be very comedic, just people just sort of talking. I think Taika Waititi does a lot is a much better in this film as an actor. But I think it could just be the fact that because of his like natural New Zealand voice, he's that's a little funnier. And I would argue that um, I would very much argue that all the other performances in this film are also decent. There's nothing amazing. There's nothing groundbreaking that you haven't seen before, but it very much works for what it needs to be. I think that is good. Yeah, and so yeah, I think the whole cast is all good at what they're doing. Um, and so they very much sort of show the very much the sort of idea and the whole thing of like they throughout the film they show the vampires with their different powers and how they don't work that well. Like one of them, so at a certain point in the film, they turn one character into a vampire. So he's sort of they try to attack and kill this guy by the name of oh goodness of uh, a Nick. So that's just sort of skipping ahead. So I guess so there's basically at one point there's a familiar for those again who haven't seen this. There, the vampire, one of the vampires has a familiar who is basically sort of like their servant. They do their chores and they clean, they get rid of dead bodies and clean up any messes they make. They do their laundry, etc., etc. So I probably didn't say etc. many times. Um, but so the familiar they have is to collect two. They ask the virgins because apparently they're just because the logic of the film is that it just sounds cooler if they've got two if they kill two virgins. You know, that's just the logic the characters run on. So then so they do this, and then I just hit the mic. Ow. So the familiar, she gets two, and then she turns. So one of them is just, and one of my favorite bits actually is it's very early on in the film where Taika Waititi's character, um, Viego, he's got a woman and he kills her, but he creates a mess and there's just like blood just spurting out of her neck, and I think that's I don't know why, and it's very and I think it's I don't know how realistic it is, but also about the realism in a film with fucking vampires is like insane, like you know but so yeah, but and which I think is a very nice, funny joke, a very good sort of way of showing that just because they're vampires, they're not the most competent at it, and they're not like the whole um like just because they're vampires doesn't mean it's just the incompetency I guess that you can receive from vampires. So anyways, they get this Nick guy, he's turned. And at one point, he's flying around, and he tries flying into the house, but he gets like caught in the window. I think that's a very nice and that's a very nice idea of like it how it would actually happen would be it's sort of they'd probably get stuck. It's like in films where characters always walk around in capes and long flowing coats, and they probably step on them. Honestly, like superheroes who fight in capes probably would step on them and trip with them and etc. Um, I think I like the whole sort of idea of showing them in a way that is sort of like, well, actually, if it was more realistic, maybe it would probably be more like this or something. I think that's the thing this film does very well of sort of presenting them as the vampires, that is rather as rather like threatening, but also laughable and it's not as threatening as they can be. So I think yeah, so um I also think the theme song that is implemented in both the film and the TV show "You're Dead," I think is very very good, and this I might get like I don't know, I might insert a bit of the song in here at some point um to just sort of play a little bit of it. So yeah, I also think that um yeah, I think it's just a very good film. I think they sort of there's also at some point the characters meet these werewolves who I think are really really good. I like the whole thing of like there's sort of like this big feud in the film and the TV series of these werewolves and vampires, how they don't get along. So they sort of in both film and the show, they they don't like each other, and so they have like this sort of feud. And I think that's very very good. And I think that's very I like the sort of through line through is that the show and the film are somewhat connected and sort of they sort of keep elements of like vampires and werewolves don't get along. There's like these really old vampires, and these vampires they're not competent per se. They just sort of do these things. I also like the in the film. So basically, at one point, so one of them, so Nick, he gets turned into a vampire by Peter, and is then he starts just going around telling everybody he's a vampire because, of course, he would. That's a weird problem. That's sort of a little. I don't know, like, why would you tell people that you're a vampire? I thought it was very weird. I thought it was like a very weird way of like trying to move the plot along. Like, I get the idea, and I get that that's sort of how to get to progress the plot. They have to do that, but I think that they could have done that in a very different way. And I don't think the way it's presented in the film is like um the best way they could have done that. To put it. Um, and so yeah, they sort of moved that. And then again, spoilers for these. I should just put a spoiler tag on every episode because there is spoilers. So anyway, so at one point they tell a guy that Nick, the guy who's recently just become a vampire, he tells someone, "Hey, I'm a vampire," and he's like, "Oh, I'm a vampire hunter." So this guy goes to their house and he is crushed by like I forget what it is, but he also in turn kills Peter, who is like burns alive. And then a couple of police come to their house, which is a really nice sort of connection to Taika Waititi's to a TV show named Wellington Paranormal, which I've heard is very, very good. It's like a police show. It's like a mockumentary style police show. In fact, let me just find it for a second. But basically, so there's two cops and they come to their place, and it's very much sort of trying to do all these things, and they're very much just like, um, yeah, they're just like the couple New Zealand police just investigating what's going on. So let me just. So basically, the premise of Wellington Paranormal. There's two police officers. It says here Sergeant Marker and officers Minogue and O'Leary are members of the Wellington, New Zealand Police. Their job is to investigate paranormal phenomena. That is the description of it on IMDb. So yeah, basically so the TV, which I have not watched, but I've heard is a very good TV series. So it's about those two police, uh, these three police rather, and the investigation of the paranormal. I think it's a mockumentary style way of filming, of like it's sort of like they've sort of got like a production crew following them as they sort of do these participate in these crimes, I guess. Not participate, but find these paranormal um people. You know, so season three, and in fact, season three is just wrapped up recently, which I will have to watch because I've heard it's very good. So yeah, season three wrapped up 31st of March, so a few days ago. So I definitely have to watch that. And so yeah, I like the whole sort of setup and connection to Type Web to that show as well as the What We Do in the Shadows TV series as well. So yeah, and so then after that, there's these. So then the group go to like a party, to like an undead sort of masquerade party. Um, and so then they introduce there's this other character who's been introduced named Stu, who is like he's a friend of Nick, but he's a human, and the guys won't eat him because they really love him and they've been making scarves and everything for him and all that. So they take him and they go to this party. And so yeah, and so they find out that he's actually human, so they try to eat him, but then they escape. However, Stu is then killed by werewolves, but then he comes back as a werewolf. And so the film ends on a sort of a happy note of they're all friends, like the werewolves and vampires are sort of mended and sort of become friends, kind of. and also throughout the film, Taika Waititi's character has been he's been sort of going after this elderly woman who he sort of loved for ages, and so he turns her, and so in the end they are together, but he looks like really young, and she looks really old, but she's like a vampire now, and so that's sort of the ending basically. I'm just going to sort of give a few more notes on the film, and then I guess I'll jump into the TV series. So just a few things. I don't think some of the jokes are very much like I've seen those before. They're very old and overused, and so I didn't find them as particularly funny. I found most of the comedy very funny, but I didn't think that all of it worked as well as it could have. And I also felt that the film was a bit bloody and boring, like gruesome and stuff, for the sake of it, rather than adding to the story. There's a bit in the film where Nick eats chip. He eats like a chip, and then he starts just vomiting up blood. And I think like that. I don't have a problem with that as an idea, but I think they just are kind of trying to do it for the sake of doing it, like that. That I mentioned earlier of them of Viego biting that woman, and then there's just like blood spurting out of her neck. I think that is funnier because I just think that's just sort of I don't know why I think that just worked better as a joke for me. But I didn't think that worked particularly well for me, and I also felt that I don't know Nick felt to me anyway a bit too stupid and a bit too like why is he telling people he's a vampire? It seemed like a very weird like this is how we're going to progress the story. We're going to just have him tell people he's a vampire, and that didn't work for me really. But other than that, really, I'm this is a very good film. I would put it as Taika Waititi's best film, and so I'm giving this an 8 out of 10 for the film. And now I guess we're going to talk about the. So that's just film, and it could honestly go up in the future, possibly depending on more rewatches and stuff. But um, now it's time to talk about the TV series, which I think is an improvement and is not quite a bit better, but better than the the film. So yeah, what we do in the shadows, the TV series, it's sort of the same idea. It's a house with it's a house with four no yes four vampires. So it's Nandor the Relentless, Laszlo Cravensworth, Nadia, and Colin Robinson. They're the four vampires that live in the house. And so they are and there is Nandor's um, familiar is Guillermo. And so these are the these are the people who live in this house. And so this show introduces a new type of vampire who is called a an energy vampire. Who so call it so there's Nando, Laszlo, and Nadia are all like just sort of regular vampires. But Colin Robinson is an energy vampire who, again, if you haven't seen the show, he basically is like so he's sort of like he can go out in the day, so he doesn't have like the usual like fangs and everything. Basically, what he does to get energy and stuff is basically he bores them and like sort of frustrates and annoys them to death. Basically, he just talks about to them about like boring things, and there's several episodes showing him talking to various people about just boring things that he does. Talking about like the most boring, basic things that like nobody cares about. He talked about like I don't remember exactly, but he would talk about like colors or like work related, like boring work things, and so that's sort of how he lives and everything. Um, And so so yeah, as I've said, I found the TV show to be a bit better than the film. I don't know if it's because I watched it first or just because I find the characters more enjoyable. But I think it's sort of a mixture of both, possibly. But I do think the characters are way more fun and interesting than like the main five, right? Yeah, well, yeah, the main five. I think are way more interesting than the film's main three. Well, five, I guess. Yeah, it's kind of a bit iffy, but I just think the characters in the show are a lot more funny and interesting. Um, I think Laszlo, who is played by Matt Berry, who I'm a massive fan of. I think Matt Berry is one of the best comedic actors working right now. Just like in general, I think uh, he's just really, really good. He's a very uh, yeah, he's very funny, and I think that I think the cast, just in general, plays off each other really well. The chemistry, the sort of the way the characters interact, and how they, sort of the difference, I guess, in characters, and sort of the thing of like that, because they're all sort of very different. The characters, like, for example, in the show, Nadia has this sort of fixation on this knight named Gregor, who basically she has sort of this obsession with, and she sort of thinks that he gets reincarnated every. So he dies, in all these different times. Like she meets this guy who she thinks is Gregor, and every time he dies by getting his head decapitated. And so she keeps throughout history keeps meeting all these different people who she thinks is Gregor and gets reincarnated as him. And she's married to Laszlo, and he very much is not for that. He gets jealous, and it is sort of at a point is sort of revealed that spoilers as TV series as well, that he is the cause of Gregor dying all these times. All the people she thinks is Gregor, he keeps killing them. Hence why they have all been decapitated, because he keeps finding ways to do that. Um, but I don't think it's just um, yeah. I also think that Harvey Gulen as Guillermo, who is the familiar for Nandor, also is very good, and I very much enjoy his character journey because he's sort of a familiar. And then at an episode in season one, I believe, called I think it's Baron's Night Out. I think is the episode, which is one of the best episodes of the series in my opinion. Let me find it. Give me 1 second. Yeah, I think so. Basically, that is so Baron's Night Out is an episode of this vampire, and he goes out, and he sort of goes on an adventure with the main group, and he's just going out and he's just like eating people, and he is um and so at one point he's because again the show is also in a mockumentary style. It's filmed the same way that the film is, in that it's a mockumentary of the it's a mockumentary about vampires. And so when he's sort of first introduced, he kills one of the people who is like one of like the cameramen. Um, and so yeah, and so at a point, like in the house. Sorry, jeez. So at one point, he's like just sort of in the house, just like and then Guillermo opens the doors and kills him, burning him to death because it's like sunlight out there. and they're all just kind of like they all sort of are like very worried and like what you just killed like one of the oldest vampires in existence, and then this sort of leads Guillermo on a story of like wondering if he is meant to be a vampire killer. And so I think it's the end of the first season. I'm pretty sure. I think so. Yeah. And so basically, the end of the first season, Guillermo finds out that he is a descendant of Van Helsing, and so then throughout the rest and throughout the entirety of season two, he sort of is wondering, am I meant to kill vampires or not? Like, am I meant to be a vampire killer? So this leads to the season finale of season two, which is the best episode of the series to me and one of my favorite episodes, just like a TV show ever, personally. Is basically the vampire. Um, so yeah, Nando, Laszlo, Nadja, and Colin go to sort of like a theatre show, and they think, oh well, like the guests of honor, and it turns out that they're going to be killed by these vampires. So then Guillermo gets in, and like the season finale is basically he just kills an entire like theater room of vampires, and it's amazing. And again, I'm spoiling everything, but I will put this. I said earlier that there was spoilers, so I said spoilers, and you kept. And if you're still listening, like I'm sorry, but I did say spoilers. Sorry. I'll put it in the description of the episode as well, just in case. And so that's sort of how season two ended, with Guillermo revealing to them that he is, a vampire killer, and he's been killing vampires for months to sort of protect them. And so it sort of leaves it on a bit of a cliffhanger uh, while we wait for season three, which I believe they are in the process of working on right now. I think I'm just sort of yeah. So they've got a season three planned, and I think they're getting close to start shooting it soon. I think. Um, let's just. I'm just trying to see if I could find something. Um, I also so the, yeah this TV show also uses the theme, the song "You're Dead," which I mentioned earlier, as the which is like the main sort of theme, and I think the song's really I think it's very good, and I think it's a very good song. And so yeah, let me just find um um anyway, I can't really find anything. But also, the series also has a lot of cameos from like big celebrities. It's got people like Haley Joel Osment in it. It's got like Mark Hamill is in it. Taika Waititi has a cameo. There's an episode of a trial. There's like a trial episode for Guillermo because he killed the Baron, and so they're just trying to sort of figure out what. So he's on trial basically for this, the killing of the Baron, and so yeah, I think that's basically it. This is a bit of a shorter episode, but it's just me talking, so it's not as like it's not like there's not geez, that was a bit loud. There's not as much to talk about in terms of like the whole thing of like the show and the film. So I gave the film, as I mentioned earlier, an 8 out of 10, and I've said that the TV series is better, which in my personal opinion it is, and so I give the TV series a 9 out of 10. And I think that's it pretty much. So yeah, that was this week's episode of Apple Movies with William Fletcher. What We Do in the Shadows, the film and TV series. So I just want to say thank you for listening. Follow. I think that this actually. Yeah, so follow at the movies with William Punch on Instagram at Jesus. Sorry. So follow this podcast on Instagram at the movies Will Fletcher. That's the name because I kind of had to get the full name in there. Follow me on Letterboxd at William F. Check out my account on IMDb at Will Fletch. And check out all previous episodes I've done for this podcast on Spotify, or check the show out on Podbean, which is where the sort of the sourcing, the sort of host platform is. So yeah, thank you for listening to this week's episode on what we're doing for the film and TV series of What We Do in the Shadows. Until next time, I'll see you all later. Goodbye.